In the early 1940s, the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean became a colossal battleground. It was a stage where the drama of World War II unfolded with ferocity and relentless ambition. The Japanese Empire, with its eyes set on dominating the Asia-Pacific region, had swiftly and aggressively expanded its territory. Islands, both large and small, dotted across the ocean, fell like dominoes. The might of the Japanese forces seemed unstoppable, their advance marked by a blend of strategic cunning and brutal force. For the United States, the war in the Pacific began in tragedy. The surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 not only left the American fleet in ruins, but also shook the nation to its core. It was a brutal awakening to the realities of a war that had, until then, seemed distant. The American response, initially, was one of scrambling to recover, to regroup, and to understand the enormity of the challenge they faced. The Japanese, meanwhile, continued their relentless march across the Pacific, capturing key territories and establishing strongholds that seemed impregnable. As 1942 dawned, the situation appeared dire for the Allies in the Pacific. American forces were under-equipped, under-trained, and unprepared for the demands of jungle and island warfare. The Japanese, on the other hand, were battle-hardened, strategically positioned, and supremely confident in their ability to repel any counteroffensive. However, beneath the surface of these early setbacks, a transformation was brewing within the American military. Leaders and strategists were learning, adapting, and devising a plan that would not only halt the Japanese advance but also turn the tide of the war. This plan was rooted in a simple yet bold strategy: island hopping. The concept of island hopping was both a revelation and a gamble. Rather than confront the Japanese head-on at their strongest points, American forces would target strategically important islands, capturing them to serve as bases for further operations. This approach meant bypassing and isolating many of the Japanese-held islands, cutting them off from supplies and reinforcements, essentially rendering them impotent. This strategy required a radical shift in both tactics and mindset. It called for a level of coordination and combined arms operations that the U.S. forces had not yet demonstrated in the Pacific theater. It also required a reassessment of what victory meant, not the conquest of every piece of land the enemy held, but rather the strategic weakening of the enemy's ability to wage war. As American forces began to regroup and rearm, there was a palpable sense of urgency mixed with a cautious optimism. Men and materials were mobilized on an unprecedented scale. Ships, planes, and armaments were produced in numbers that seemed impossible just a year before. Training camps buzzed with activity as soldiers, Marines, airmen, and sailors prepared for a new kind of war, a war that would be fought across the beaches, jungles, and skies of countless Pacific islands. The stage was set for a dramatic shift in the Pacific War. The American offensive capability, though initially untested and unproven in this new theater of war, was growing at a pace that the Japanese defense could not match. As the sun rose on a new phase of the war, it was clear that the coming battles would not just shape the fate of the Pacific, but of the entire world. In this cauldron of conflict and strategy, we meet our protagonist, Major Samuel "Sam" Hawkins, a determined and seasoned Marine Corps officer. His story, woven into the fabric of this grand strategy, offers a human perspective on the war, a tale of courage, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of victory against the odds. As 1942 unfolded, the war in the Pacific was reaching a critical juncture. The Japanese Empire, with its rapid and aggressive expansion, had stretched its resources thin, creating vulnerabilities that the American military was keen to exploit. In the halls of American military strategy, a daring and innovative plan began to take shape: a plan that would come to define the American approach in the Pacific, the island hopping strategy. The architects of this strategy were a group of military minds who understood that the traditional approach to warfare would not suffice in the vast and varied landscape of the Pacific. Admirals Chester Nimitz and William Halsey were at the forefront of this strategic shift. Nimitz, a calm and calculating leader, and Halsey, known for his aggressive and dynamic approach, complemented each other in crafting a plan that was as bold as it was risky. The essence of the island hopping strategy lay in its selective targeting. Instead of attacking every Japanese-held island, the plan was to capture key islands that were strategically important, either because of their location or their resources. These islands would then serve as bases for launching further attacks, gradually tightening the noose around Japan's Pacific holdings. This approach aimed to avoid the most fortified Japanese positions, reducing American casualties and speeding up the progress of the campaign. The first test of this new strategy came with the Guadalcanal campaign. Guadalcanal, a seemingly insignificant island in the Solomon Islands chain, held a critical asset, an airfield. Control of this airfield would provide the Americans with a base for air operations, crucial for the success of future campaigns. The battle for Guadalcanal would not only be a test of the island hopping strategy, but also a brutal initiation into the realities of jungle warfare for American troops. Meanwhile, Major Sam Hawkins, our protagonist, was preparing for his role in this pivotal campaign. A seasoned officer, Hawkins had seen his share of combat, but the Pacific theater presented a new set of challenges. He understood that the success of the island hopping strategy depended as much on the resilience and adaptability of the men under his command as it did on the plans drawn up in strategy rooms. As Hawkins and his men embarked for Guadalcanal, they were acutely aware of the task ahead. The Japanese were known for their tenacity in defense, and the dense jungles of the Pacific Islands were a far cry from the battlefields of Europe or North Africa. The Americans would not only be fighting against a determined enemy, but also against the elements, the relentless heat, the torrential rains, and the unforgiving terrain. The chapter concludes with the landing at Guadalcanal, as American forces make their first major offensive in the Pacific. The air is tense with anticipation and fear. The unknown challenges of the island hopping campaign loom large, but there is also a sense of resolve among the men. They know that the path to victory in the Pacific runs through these islands, and they are determined to take the first step, no matter the cost. Through the eyes of Major Hawkins, we see the unfolding of a new chapter in the Pacific War, a chapter marked by bold strategy, untested tactics, and the indomitable spirit of the American soldier. The Guadalcanal campaign, initiated in August 1942, marked a pivotal moment in the Pacific War. It was here that the American forces, under the command of Major General Alexander Vandegrift, embarked on their first major offensive operation against the Japanese. This campaign was not just a military operation. It was a test of wills, a brutal struggle for survival, and a turning point that would dictate the momentum of the war in the Pacific. Major Sam Hawkins and his unit were among the first wave of Marines to set foot on the shores of Guadalcanal. The landing was met with surprising ease, a stark contrast to the fierce resistance they had braced for. However, the initial lack of opposition was deceptive. The Japanese forces, though caught off guard, quickly regrouped and launched counterattacks that would turn the island into a deadly battleground. The battle for Guadalcanal was characterized by intense jungle warfare. The dense malarial jungles of the island were as much an adversary as the Japanese soldiers who had mastered the art of camouflage and guerrilla tactics. For the American troops, unaccustomed to such conditions, the environment was as alien as it was hostile. The relentless heat, torrential rains and the ever-present threat of disease tested the limits of human endurance. As the battle raged on, Major Hawkins found himself in the thick of it. A natural leader, he inspired his men through his unwavering courage and tactical acumen. His unit was frequently at the forefront of the most grueling engagements, be it repelling fierce night attacks or launching assaults on well-entrenched Japanese positions. The narrative delves into the personal experiences of Hawkins and his men, highlighting the physical and psychological toll of the campaign. Scenes of close-quarter combat, ambushes, and the harrowing experience of night battles paint a vivid picture of the brutality of the fighting on Guadalcanal. Despite the hardships, the resolve of the American forces remained unbroken. The capture of the airfield, later named Henderson Field, became a focal point of the campaign. The airfield allowed the Americans to fly in much-needed supplies and reinforcements, and to launch air attacks against Japanese ships attempting to resupply their troops. This advantage proved crucial in the battle for control of the island. The chapter also touches upon the broader strategic significance of the Guadalcanal campaign. The successful defense of Henderson Field and the eventual American victory marked the first major defeat of the Japanese forces in the Pacific. It disrupted the momentum of the Japanese expansion and demonstrated that the island-hopping strategy could succeed. As the chapter concludes, the focus shifts back to Major Hawkins and his unit. Weary but victorious, they reflect on their experiences. The cost had been high, but the importance of their achievement was clear. Guadalcanal was more than just a battle. It was a symbol of hope and a testament to the courage and resilience of the American soldier. The victory at Guadalcanal set the stage for the next phase of the Pacific War. It was a beacon that signaled the beginning of the end for Japanese ambitions in the Pacific, and a reminder that the tide of war, once turned, would push inexorably towards the home islands of Japan. As the Pacific War progressed, the American forces began to showcase a significant evolution in both technology and tactics. This chapter delves into the innovations and strategic shifts that were pivotal in enhancing the American offensive capabilities against the increasingly beleaguered Japanese defenses. In the realm of technology, American ingenuity and industrial might were on full display. The introduction of newer, more efficient warships, such as the Essex-class aircraft carriers, and the advancements in aviation technology gave the U.S. Navy an unmatched edge in naval warfare. The development of the F-6F Hellcat and the F-4U Corsair, with their superior speed, range, and firepower, allowed American pilots to gain air superiority over the Pacific. The chapter explores how these technological advancements not only boosted the morale of American forces, but also struck fear in the hearts of their adversaries. On the ground, the Americans were making significant strides as well. The M4 Sherman tank, while not as heavily armored as its counterparts, was highly reliable and versatile, making it a valuable asset in the diverse terrains of the Pacific Islands. The introduction of portable radios enhanced communication on the battlefield, allowing for more coordinated and effective operations. The narrative then shifts to the evolving tactics that accompanied these technological advancements. The American military leadership, learning from the early challenges of the Pacific campaigns, adapted their strategies to suit the unique conditions of island warfare. Amphibious assaults, a cornerstone of the island-hopping strategy, were refined and executed with increasing precision. The use of combined arms, coordinating infantry, armor, artillery, and air support became a hallmark of American offensive operations. Major Sam Hawkins, having experienced the brutal realities of jungle warfare at Guadalcanal, recognized the significance of these advancements. The chapter includes a detailed account of a particular operation where Hawkins's unit, equipped with the latest technology and utilizing refined tactics, successfully overtakes a heavily fortified Japanese position. This operation serves as a microcosm of the larger shift in the balance of power in the Pacific. The chapter also touches on the psychological impact of these advancements on both American and Japanese troops. For the Americans, the influx of superior weapons and equipment, along with the successful implementation of new tactics, bolstered confidence and fighting spirit. For the Japanese, however, the growing American superiority in technology and tactics began to erode their morale as they struggled to counter the escalating American offensive. As the chapter concludes, the narrative reflects on the broader implications of these developments. The growing American offensive capability, powered by technological and tactical superiority, was rapidly outpacing Japan's defensive efforts. The once daunting Japanese fortifications across the Pacific were no longer impregnable. The stage was set for the American forces to press their advantage, signaling a shift in the tide of war that would lead to the eventual liberation of countless occupied territories and islands. Through the eyes of Major Hawkins and his men, the chapter presents a vivid and engaging account of this pivotal phase of the Pacific War, where technology and tactics combine to shape the course of history. In the shadow of technological advancements and strategic victories, the human cost of the Pacific War was profound and deeply personal. Chapter 5 takes a poignant turn, focusing on the experiences and sacrifices of the soldiers, both American and Japanese, who fought in these relentless battles. The narrative begins with a vivid description of the daily life of a soldier in the Pacific. The oppressive heat, the unrelenting rain, and the ever-present threat of disease were constant companions. Malaria, dysentery, and other tropical diseases claimed as many lives as the enemy's bullets. The soldiers' stories, recounted through letters sent home, diary entries, and later interviews, reveal the physical and emotional toll of the war. Major Sam Hawkins, our central figure, is portrayed dealing with the weight of command. The loss of men under his command, the decisions that cost lives, and the responsibility of keeping morale high in the face of overwhelming odds are constant burdens. His character serves as a conduit for exploring the leadership challenges and the psychological impact of combat. The chapter also delves into the experiences of Japanese soldiers, offering a balanced perspective. Despite being on the opposing side, these soldiers shared similar hardships: scarcity of food and supplies, the pressure of an unyielding command structure, and the fading hope of victory. The narrative highlights how the Japanese soldiers, bound by a strict code of honor and facing the inevitability of defeat, often chose death over surrender. A particularly moving section of this chapter recounts a temporary ceasefire to recover the wounded and dead. In this brief respite from combat, American and Japanese soldiers, usually engaged in fierce battle, are depicted sharing a moment of mutual respect and humanity, acknowledging each other's suffering. As the chapter progresses, the toll of the island-hopping campaign becomes apparent. The beaches and jungles of the Pacific Islands are transformed into graveyards for the young men who came from faraway lands. Each island, each battle, carried a cost that went far beyond military statistics, the cost of dreams unfulfilled, families shattered, and futures extinguished. The chapter concludes with a reflection on the impact of this human cost. For the survivors, the war would leave indelible scars, both physical and emotional. The experiences of these soldiers would shape their lives and the lives of their loved ones long after the war ended. Through the eyes of Major Hawkins and his men, the chapter paints a vivid picture of the bravery, sacrifice, and the enduring spirit of those who fought in one of history's most brutal theaters of war. The campaign to retake the Philippines in late 1944 marked a crucial phase in the Pacific War, a testament to the growing might and resolve of the American forces. Chapter 6 delves into this pivotal operation, highlighting its strategic importance and the intense battles that led to a significant American victory. The Philippines, occupied by Japan since early 1942, held a strategic position of immense value. Its recapture was vital for cutting Japan off from its occupied territories in Southeast Asia and for establishing advanced bases for the eventual invasion of Japan. For the American troops, liberating the Philippines was also a matter of honor, a fulfillment of General Douglas MacArthur's famous promise, "I shall return." Major Sam Hawkins and his unit were among the forces tasked with the invasion of Leyte, one of the key islands in the Philippines. The narrative vividly describes the amphibious landing at Leyte Gulf, one of the largest naval battles in history. The American forces faced fierce resistance from the Japanese, who were determined to hold the island at all costs. The chapter paints a detailed picture of the battles that raged on land, sea, and air. The naval engagements in the waters around the Philippines were colossal, involving scores of ships, aircraft, and thousands of men. The introduction of kamikaze pilots by the Japanese added a new and terrifying dimension to the naval warfare. On land, the American and Filipino guerrilla forces encountered a determined enemy entrenched in the jungles and mountains of Leyte. The narrative follows Major Hawkins and his men as they navigate the treacherous terrain, engaging in brutal combat against a foe that refused to surrender. The descriptions of these battles are graphic yet respectful, emphasizing the valor and resilience of the soldiers. The chapter also explores the human aspect of the campaign. The liberation of the Philippines brought American and Filipino soldiers together in a shared cause. The gratitude of the Filipino people, liberated after years of harsh occupation, is poignantly depicted through interactions with the local population. As the battle for Leyte concludes with an American victory, the chapter reflects on the broader implications of the campaign. The successful recapture of the Philippines dealt a severe blow to Japanese control in the Pacific and provided a significant morale boost to the Allied forces. It was a clear demonstration of the shifting tide of the war, a tide now firmly in favor of the Allies. The chapter concludes with Major Hawkins and his unit, battle-weary but victorious, preparing for the next phase of their campaign. Their experiences in the Philippines had tested their limits, but also reinforced their resolve to see the war through to its end. The liberation of the Philippines was not just a military victory, it was a beacon of hope, signaling the beginning of the end of Japanese expansionism and the dawn of liberation across the Pacific. As the Pacific War neared its climax, American forces set their sights on two critical islands, Iwo Jima and Okinawa. These islands represented the final barriers to the American offensive, serving as gateways to the Japanese mainland. Chapter 7 chronicles the intense battles for these islands, underscoring the strategic importance and the immense human cost of these campaigns. The battle for Iwo Jima, a small volcanic island situated halfway between Japan and the Mariana Islands, commenced in February 1945. For the American forces, Iwo Jima was crucial for providing a base for fighter escorts and emergency landing strips for bombers attacking Japan. The narrative vividly describes the amphibious landing on Iwo Jima's black sand beaches, met with a hailstorm of fire from well-entrenched Japanese defenders. Major Sam Hawkins, leading his unit in one of the most challenging battles of the Pacific, faced an entrenched enemy deeply committed to defending the island. The Japanese, utilizing an extensive network of bunkers, tunnels, and artillery positions, inflicted heavy casualties on the American forces. The descriptions of the battle are intense and graphic, capturing the brutal close-quarters combat that defined the struggle for Iwo Jima. The chapter pays homage to the iconic moment when American soldiers raised the flag atop Mount Suribachi, a symbol of hope and determination amidst the carnage. Yet, the battle raged on for several more weeks, with every inch of the island contested fiercely. The invasion of Okinawa began in April 1945. Okinawa, the largest of the Ryukyu Islands, was pivotal for launching the planned invasion of mainland Japan. The campaign for Okinawa is portrayed as the most extensive and bloodiest battle of the Pacific War. The American forces, having learned from previous battles, launched a massive amphibious assault combined with an extensive aerial and naval bombardment. The narrative follows Major Hawkins and his unit as they encounter ferocious resistance from the Japanese forces. The battle scenes depict the chaotic and brutal nature of the fighting, with a focus on both the strategic operations and the personal stories of the soldiers. The Japanese employed kamikaze tactics extensively during the Okinawa campaign, with waves of suicide pilots attacking the American fleet, adding a harrowing dimension to the naval battle. The psychological impact of these attacks on American sailors and airmen is poignantly captured. As the chapter progresses, it reflects on the toll of the Okinawa campaign. The civilian casualties, the massive losses on both sides, and the sheer scale of destruction are conveyed with a sense of somber reflection. For Major Hawkins and his men, the victory at Okinawa came at a high price, but it also brought the end of the war within reach. The chapter concludes with the Allied forces poised for the final assault on Japan. The victories at Iwo Jima and Okinawa had paved the way for an invasion of the Japanese mainland, a prospect both daunting and inevitable. Through the experiences of Major Hawkins, the narrative conveys a mixture of relief, anticipation, and apprehension as the soldiers prepare for what they expect to be the war's final and most grueling chapter. In The Final Push, Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the story captures the culmination of the American offensive in the Pacific, a campaign marked by extraordinary courage, unprecedented sacrifice, and the unwavering resolve to achieve victory. As the Pacific War drew towards its conclusion, the final chapter of our story, the end game and reflection, provides a contemplative closure to the intense and tumultuous journey of Major Sam Hawkins and his men. This chapter not only recounts the final stages of the war, but also reflects on the profound impact of their experiences. The narrative begins with the aftermath of the Okinawa campaign. The American forces, having secured a critical foothold so close to Japan, were gearing up for an invasion of the Japanese mainland. The prospect of this invasion filled the troops with a sense of grim determination, aware of the inevitable heavy casualties that would come with it. However, the course of the war took an unexpected turn with the dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. The descriptions of these events are handled with care, focusing on the reactions of Major Hawkins and his men, who were both relieved at the prospect of the war ending without further bloodshed and horrified at the scale of destruction unleashed. In the wake of Japan's surrender, the chapter shifts to a reflective tone. Major Hawkins, now back home, grapples with his memories of the war. The narrative explores the themes of loss, survival, and the psychological scars of combat. The return to civilian life is depicted as a challenging transition for many soldiers, including Hawkins, who struggle to reconcile their wartime experiences with the peace and normalcy of home. The chapter also pays tribute to the fallen and honors the sacrifices of those who served. It highlights how the war in the Pacific changed the lives of millions and reshaped the global landscape. The personal stories of the soldiers, interwoven with the broader historical context, provide a poignant reminder of the human cost of war. As the chapter concludes, The focus expands to the legacy of the Pacific War. It discusses how the experiences of soldiers like Major Hawkins and the lessons learned from the island-hopping campaign influenced military strategy and international relations in the years following the war. The narrative acknowledges the resilience and valor of the soldiers who fought in the Pacific, emphasizing their role in shaping the course of history. The story of Major Hawkins and his men stands as a testament to the courage, sacrifice, and endurance of the greatest generation. The chapter, and the story as a whole, closes on a note of solemn remembrance and respect for those who served and sacrificed in one of history's most brutal and significant theaters of war. It leaves the reader with a deeper understanding of the Pacific War's complexities and a renewed appreciation for the human spirit's resilience in the face of unimaginable challenges.